All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Oh, I need my clicker. Is it up here? Ah, it's here. Thank you. Matt's ahead of the game for me. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. This is our last class in the Emotionally Healthy Christianity course. And this has just given me so much joy to teach and things that I've been thinking about for years and still thinking about. And there's so much more that I'd love to teach, but I just want to keep encouraging you guys to keep on the journey. And Pastor Bill and I, we're always here to do pastoral counseling, free counseling, and then we also have a partnership with a counseling service that we can refer. But if you're saying, all right, I'm starting to kind of get into this, or I know somebody who's struggling emotionally, that's what we are here for, to keep encouraging you guys. So let me begin with an opening prayer, and then we can start our discussion. Lord God, thank you so much for the opportunity to once again look into your word and see what your word says about our bodies and souls, our emotions and our health. I pray that you would use this course to help us to live for you, to be guided by you, and to walk with you. And so ask that you would speak through your word, and don't let anything I'm doing get in the way of your word. Amen. All right. So here we go. Just wanted to begin. Hopefully you all got one of these on the way in, our outline for tonight's class, and I sent it out to those of you who are online. And I kind of are monitoring both groups, so if you have questions or comments, I'll try to take a look over here as well and see where everybody's at. But let's just talk about where we've been so far. We began this class talking about how very often we can get emotionally, have dissonance and struggles, emotional struggles, when we look at our story and we have these expectations of how our story was supposed to go. And so we talked in the first class of looking at our story and the expectations of our story in view of God's story. And recognize that our story is part of a world that was created good. And so there's a lot of good stuff in our story, but a world that fell into sin. And so there's a lot of sin in our lives and results of sin and just part of being in a world that's broken. And so you have sin and death and disease. And some of it's just the casualty of being a part of a broken world. And then we talked about how there's a Savior who came in to redeem us, and a resurrection is our hope. And so we said, let's look at our story in view of God's story. And so we had you draw out what your story's actually been like, and then how could you match that story up with God's story, okay? Then we talked about the next thing about your spiritual battle based on your own unique nature and nurture. And so we went into the Enneagram, had you look up your Enneagram number, and so to understand that all of us, not only are we who we are emotionally and spiritually because of our story and our experiences, but also some of our personality. And depending on how you view personality, some people look at it as it's just a nature thing. This is just who I am. I have this kind of perfectionistic nature. I'm a type 1 on the Enneagram, or I'm a type 2. I just always want to help. And I see that in our kids, that we've raised all of our kids, I think, the same way, and yet they have unique personalities. And so with our unique personalities also comes unique emotional and spiritual struggles. So we talked about that. So hopefully you paid attention to, this is where I go when I get unhealthy. This is what can happen with my personality. All right, so that's what we talked about the next class. Then the third class, we talked about bearing the cross of your stage of life. And we talked about the journey, the common journey of the Christian life, where you come into the Christian faith through Christ's cross, and then you become a learner, and you're learning all different things, and you're taking in all that knowledge, and it can sometimes sometimes you can struggle with arrogance when you're learning, or overconfidence. But that's a really important stage to learn. And then we talked about the warrior stage. You get in this, sometimes Christians can get in this stage where they learn a lot, and so now they're ready to take on the world and put their faith into action. And sometimes you can struggle with there is not overconfidence, but also, pride or being unloving or pharisaical. You got it all together. And then sometimes you go through this stage a lot of times in your 30s, 40s. It's not just those times, but it can happen where you finally hit this wall where it's not working anymore. And we talked about that cross of brokenness and then moving through that wall towards a faith that hopefully, as you walk through it with other people, with help and with pastors and spiritual leaders and a community of believers, you become a more authentic Christian where you see the reality of our dependency and need for Christ. So some people said, well, can I go through that cycle 10 times in my life? Yeah, I mean, sometimes that goes more quickly for some people. Sometimes you have mini cycles in your life, but we talked about just being aware of the unique emotional and spiritual struggles of your time of life, of what's going on in your life, maybe what's going on with your kids if you have kids, or your marriage, or your health, different stages of life. Then last week we talked about walking through grief, pain, trauma, conflict, all those things. The reality that everybody hurts. But although pain and suffering is a universal, you can't sneak through this life without suffering. Everybody's path through suffering is different. And so I was speaking to a dear friend of mine, and she told me I could tell you all these stories. And she just said, when she's dealing with trauma therapy and even in the struggles she's had in her own life, she says, grief and trauma are the most individualized experience. So no two people are going to have the same experience. So we need each other. We need each other to be empathetic. We need each other to walk with us. And we need especially to focus on Jesus and his cross, the one who suffered pain and grief for us. Tonight, what hopefully we're going to try to put all this together is talking about building healthy rhythms for resiliency. As we talked about, you're going to suffer pain, you're going to suffer struggle, you're going to have enemies, you're going to have tough times. This is the reality of living in a broken world. And so instead of thinking you can change all those hard things outside of you, how can you become spiritually and emotionally resilient and strong? And so we're going to talk about different healthy rhythms. And this is also going to be kind of a unique, personalized experience, but hopefully we can look at some common practices. And 3 books that have been helpful for me, and there's many more, but a lot of them, especially I'm using in this class. It's on your handout. It's on your handout in here for those of you who received this online as well. But The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. He talks about how hurry is one of the leading causes of emotional and spiritual problems. It's hard to love people if you're in a hurry, right? You ever late for something? When you're late for something and you're trying to get, family, friends out the door, do you usually speak in the most loving way and act in the most loving way to the people around you when you're in a hurry? No, probably not. That's usually, and that's kind of the joke, especially getting kids ready to come to church. Like you have your biggest argument on the way to church because you're late for church, right? So he talks about the ruthless elimination of hurry and a lot of his practices that he talks about, we're going to be talking about in the study tonight. And then emotionally healthy spirituality. I mean, this chapter in that book on healthy rhythms is something I really reread and went over, but it's kind of been an overall idea. I've used this book, kind of a lot of things I'm pulling from this book throughout this study. And then the common rule is just another book on coming up with healthy, spiritually and emotionally healthy practices. Okay, so that's a little biography, a little book recommendations. So how can we do this? How can we build healthy rhythms for resiliency? What is this like? How can we do this? So what does a healthy, resilient person look like? What does it look like to be healthy, emotionally healthy, spiritually healthy? Well, Jesus tells us in the upper room. We're going to be celebrating Holy Week, the night Jesus, the week of Jesus' death this next week. the book of John, half of the book is in the upper room. This was really important for John. This was a really memorable time where Jesus spoke to them very candidly and really directly. And so basically, maybe it's not half. It's almost half, because I think it starts in the upper room in chapter 11 or 12 of John, and then it goes to chapter 18, 17 or 18 in the upper room. And in the upper room, the night before Jesus died, Jesus taught his disciples this. He said this from John chapter 15. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You already are clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, abide in me, literally, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. It is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So this is a really beautiful section where Jesus talks about a spiritually and emotionally healthy person is somebody who bears fruit. Someone who bears fruit means somebody who's doing good things, good works. It's all under loving God, loving your neighbor. You're a person who's bearing fruit. You're not withering away. And he uses this very beautiful image of a vine. So here's my art. Ready? So you have this vine. And then you have these branches. Now, it's not a tree, he says a vine. So I think that can be really important here. So here are the branches. And he says, if you remain in me and I remain in you, you will bear fruit. And then if you're not producing fruit, you get cut off. He also prunes you, he challenges you, and you go through all the challenges and tests, and we've talked about that. But he says, if you remain in me, you will bear, look at it, I even did color coordinate. This is grapes here, right? Green, and you got grapes. Now, so you're bearing fruit. You're remaining in Jesus, and if you remain in him and he remains in you, you bear much fruit. Now, I don't know a ton about making a vineyard and making grapevines work, but what are some things that you need? Do you just put some seeds in the ground and hope the vines, they grow along the ground? What do you need for a healthy vineyard? You need a trellis or some sort of something for the vine to climb up onto, some structure, right? And that's what we're talking about tonight. The big question is, here I'm going to draw the trellis. Ready? That's the visual aid for tonight. The question is, what kind of trellis, what kind of structures are you putting up in your life so that you can remain in Jesus and abide in him, that your whole life, think about it, if you were always abiding in Christ and his word was abiding in you, and all day long you were abiding in Jesus and walking with Jesus, and your life was all about Jesus, he promises you're going to bear much fruit. Now that makes sense to us, but if we have no structures in our life, if we just say, oh, yeah, I should do that and hope that happens, and yeah, I'm a believer in Jesus, and I went to church when I was younger, I did these things, and sure, I know a lot of facts about Jesus. Yeah, I know Jesus, but your whole life, your life has no kind of structure that enables you to bear fruit, to be connected to the vine. You're like a vine that's going to be on the ground. It's not going to have the room and the ability to bear much fruit. Okay? And so tonight what we want to talk about is, what is the trellis in your life? What are the structures that you're going to put up? You say, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, and I have no idea why I'm so anxious. All right, well, what is your life like? Well, I wake up in the morning, I put my phone next to my bed, it's always on through the night, it's kind of dinging through the night with updates, on news updates, and I wake up in the morning, I turn on the news, I check Fox News and CNN, and then I see what's going on in the world, and then I check social media and see what other people are successful at, and I don't know why I'm so anxious and afraid and sad, right? And then on top of that, I sometimes look at God's word if I have a chance, but maybe at the end of the day, how about your relationship? Well, I don't really have any healthy relationships right now. So if your whole life, you don't have any kind of structure to abide in Jesus, there's no room for Jesus, your life is structured in a way that has no purpose, as much as we want to say we're abiding in Jesus and say we're going to stay with Jesus, there's no room for us to stay in Jesus. So how can we do this? And I just have a verse on here next. What does it look like to bear good fruit? Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. So that's the goal of life. That's the person bearing fruit, is somebody who loves God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loves their neighbor. So how can we structure our life? And all of you you're in different stages of life. You have different work schedules. You have different family structures. You have different personalities. You have different gifts. But now the question is, how can I structure my life so that I can abide in Jesus, his words can abide in me, and I can remain in him, and I can bear fruit, which means to love God with my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love my neighbor. How can I do that? So we're going to talk about some different options, some different practices that some people have, and I want you to think about, all right, what would be my trellis? What does it look like? Okay? All right, so now we can go to the next page here if you're following along on the thing. All right. Any comments online? I'm just going to kind of check on here. Doesn't look like people are captivated by the discussion so far. All right. So here's my question. How can we structure a healthy trellis based on our purpose, our personality, and our unique practices? Again, don't want to be legalistic here. Legalism would say everybody's got to do it this way. Everybody's got to go to church, read their Bible, be in community, do these practices this way. That would be Pharisaicism. That would be the Pharisees in the New Testament where they were saying these are the laws. We're going to talk about what does it look like for your purpose? How are you wired? What is your purpose in life? What is your personality? Think about your Enneagram number. And then what are some practices that you can pick from that says, okay, I want to do this practice and this is how I want to do it, okay? So let's begin with that idea of purpose. All right? I've talked about this book. Again, one of my favorite books outside of the Bible is A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, that Jewish psychologist who survived the Holocaust, and he really understood that we are purpose-driven creatures, people. That if somebody says, I just don't feel any purpose in my life anymore, that's not good. You know that's scary, right? If you're like, I don't have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, that's not good. But if a person does, you can do almost anything. And that's what he discovered. He said, the difference between the people who survived, if they had that option, that ability, that they made it through the concentration camp, is that the only possible chance is if a person has a why, a why to live for, a purpose, they can endure almost anyhow. If you have a why, if you can see purpose in your life, even in the midst of suffering, you can endure almost anything. And he even says this line, which I think is true, suffering ceases to be suffering when it has a purpose. And the most painful things that we endure are the things that don't seem to make any sense. And doesn't, like we talked about last week, doesn't mean that we are ever going to get a clear answer, but to believe that there is a purpose, that our life has purpose, is one of the most important things that we do. Because when a person emotionally says, my life has no purpose, that is a scary place to be. And that's what Viktor Frankl found out. He says, the other kind of secular psychologists around his day, Freud and Skinner, and these psychologists, they said, we're just animals. We just procreate, and we need pleasure, and we just need to survive. Life is just about survival. And so they looked at animals and how animals, just are driven by food, by their stomach, or driven by, pleasure, basically. And Viktor Frankl says, no, human beings, we ask why questions. We don't just ask, does this satisfy my desires? We ask, does it matter? And so that is a huge, and so he changed a whole psychiatric unit, this hospital that had high numbers of, and forgive me, I think I've already said this in this class, but I find it so fascinating, high number of suicides in this clinic. And when he took it over, it went down to 0 because he just helped people find purpose in their life. Well, this is also what we see in the life of Jesus. What does it say, Jesus' purpose in Hebrews? For the joy set before Jesus, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of God, the throne of God. So for the joy of having you, the joy of rescuing you, he endured the cross. He stayed on the cross. When all the people were taunting him to come down from that cross, come down from the cross, Jesus, show us you're the Son of God. He stayed up on the cross because he was thinking about you. He knew his life always had purpose. And so he was willing to endure the suffering he went through because he knew it mattered. And so even Jesus lived on purpose. And you can see that, when Herod told him to get out of town or else he was going to come after him, he says, you tell that fox I'm going to go to Jerusalem, and on the third, I'm going to be there today and tomorrow, and on the third day I'm going to reach my goal. Nothing could stop him. He was not going to defend himself. He was not going to get his way out. He was going to march all the way to the cross because he lived on purpose, okay? Paul had some of the same thing. Usually, I've said this before, when I go and visit people in nursing homes or people who feel like, I'm not doing anything anymore. My husband's gone or my wife's gone, my friend's gone, I have nobody left. I'm just the only one left. I'll remind them you have fruitful labor. This is what Paul said. He says, for me to live as Christ and to die is gain. I'm going to live my life. It's to give glory to Christ. That's my goal. That's my purpose. And if I'm going to go on living, he's in jail at this time. If I'm going to go on living in this body, that's going to mean fruitful labor for me. God's not done with me yet, is what he's saying. In fact, do you remember the story of Elijah when he went through his in the Old Testament, he was this great prophet, and he fell into a deep, dark depression because everything he was doing didn't seem to matter. He won this big contest between the prophets of Baal versus the Lord God, and he set up this contest, and he won this battle. And Jezebel, the queen of northern Israel, when she found out about this, her and her husband Ahaz, that he was kind of a chump, they still put a bounty out for his head. Instead of coming to repentance after they saw the Lord winning this contest, beating these prophets of Baal, instead of coming to faith, they put a bounty on his head. And so Elijah ran off and he says, you know what? I've been faithful, but they've torn down all the altars to the Lord, and I'm the only prophet left, and now they're trying to kill me too. He's like, my life's got no purpose. And God gave him a purpose again. He says, I got work for you to do. You're going to go anoint this person. You're going to go put this person in charge. You're going to anoint Elisha to be your next guy in command. And I still have 7,000 people that have not bowed their feet before Baal. Your ministry matters. Your life matters. And that gave him energy again. He also gave him a meal, which sometimes that's what we need to take care of our bodies. He gave him a good meal, and he gave his life purpose again. He said, get back to work. I'm not done with you yet. And that's what we need to hear over and over again. Based on some of these things, I came up with this own personal mission statement for me, like how I feel my unique personality and talents and things like that. I try to say this every morning. In a world of superficial spirituality, I help others deepen their walk with Jesus. So that's why I love these classes. So I thank you. You guys are doing so, just thank you for this opportunity, because I believe what I'm here to do is, in a world of superficial spirituality, I help people have a deeper walk with Jesus. That's what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so I'd encourage you, maybe come up with your own mission statement. Where do you see your talents? Where do you see your gifts? Where do you see yourself? And then how can you put that into, this is what I want to do every day when I wake up. This is who I am. This is who I'm serving. This is how I can serve God. Basically, I just want you to know this idea that, trying to advance the slide. I don't know what's going on here. This idea that God's not done with you yet. You got purpose. You have purpose. And it changes day to day sometimes, but God has stuff for you to do. If he didn't have stuff for you to do, he'd have already taken you home. So don't short his work, what he's got work for you to do. There's people he wants you to serve. There's people who need the talents and gifts and your opportunity and your perspective. And so that's one of the most important things for healthy resiliency, is always remembering my life has purpose. My life has purpose. There's people for me to help. I've things to do. God's not done with me yet. That's one way to always stay resilient. Because if you don't have that, you can have all the other stuff and you're not going to want to get out of bed in the morning. Okay? We all good online? I think we are. We all good? All right. Now this idea of, just to remind you, your unique personality. So your trellis that you're putting up to kind of bear fruit is got to have something about purpose. You know, what's my purpose? Why am I here? And even if you can't answer that question, you need to believe that, but even before you see it. Sometimes you can't find it, right? Sometimes it's just by faith, knowing that God designed me, he's still got stuff for me to do, even when you don't know what that is. Even when you're kind of still trying to figure that out. Sometimes it's just, I got to help that person in front of me, whoever that is in front of me today. Every day I wake up, I'm the good Samaritan, and God has put this person in front of me. I got to help that person, okay? So, but just to believe that. But then the next thing with your unique trellis of the structures and the things you're going to put up in your life are going to be different than mine. I'm wired differently. Pastor Bill's wired differently. He's got to wake up every day. He's got so much energy, he's got to run 6-8 miles every day to just get it out in the morning. And if he doesn't, that's just hard. He's got to run. And that's how he stays healthy spiritually and emotionally. It's how he thinks about sermons. It's how he thinks about the team here. He thinks about you guys. It's the podcast he listens to. I mean, that's his personality. That's part of his trellis. And that's not me, right? I like doing other kinds of exercise and things like that, but it's just so interesting how, all right, don't take somebody else's trellis. Just see that other people have one. Now, what are you going to do? Think about your Enneagram number. Think about your stage of life. Think about your work schedule. Think about different things. And now, what are the structures? So now, here are some of the specific practices that I want to talk about. The practices, a lot of them I start with S. A lot of these I got from that book, A Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, but also, these are just ancient practices. These go back to the early Christian church. Some of these go back to the Old Testament. A lot of these things you can see in the life of Jesus. This is the practices that Jesus did. So Silence and solitude, Sabbath, simplicity, slowness, socializing or community, fasting, and then taking care of your physical body. So these are some of these practices that will keep you spiritually and emotionally resilient. So maybe take these and modify them according to your personality. But these are ancient practices that go back to the early Christian church. Again, some of them to the Old Testament. Many of them we can find in the life of Jesus on how Jesus built his trellis, his structure in his life, the structures he put in his life. Because again, if you don't choose how you're going to abide in Jesus, your phone is going to choose your schedule for you. The media or whatever, or your life, or the craziness, or your stomach, or whatever else is going to choose your life for you. So you need to make choices as to what structures are you going to put up in your life so that you can have a life walking and abiding with Jesus. So the first one is silence and solitude. We see this over and over again in the life of Jesus. I just got a couple of verses here from Mark. It says, at once the Spirit sent him, that's Jesus, out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days being tempted by Satan. And John Mark Homer in his book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, makes it sound like, he says, he didn't go out into the wilderness because that's necessarily a place of weakness, but to be alone with his Father, that was a place of strength. That's where he would be strong when he was going to be attacked and tempted by the devil. That was his perspective on it. I think there's some truth there, but just that he went away to get away to be with the Lord, to be in a place of silence and solitude. And the next verse is probably even a little bit more clear. We read about this over and over again in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Jesus is always doing this, it seems like. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. So Jesus had all this stuff that he had to do, like save the world. And in this section in Mark, if you look at Mark chapter 1, he had just healed a bunch of people, and there were people pounding on his door the next day. All these people that wanted healing and had demon possession and physical ailments, and instead of helping them, he got up early and left and went off to a solitary place to pray, to be alone with the Lord. So if you feel like getting away, opening your Bible, reading God's word, spending time in prayer is something you just don't have time for, Jesus believed that this is one of the most important things to do for him. This is how he was able to do things. As he's true man and true God, right? And so as he was strengthening himself emotionally and spiritually, he got alone to be with his Father. Even as a young boy, he was 12 years old, where did they find him? In the temple, being alone with his Father. And so silence and solitude. Now, if you have little kiddos at home or whatever else is going on, it's sometimes going to be harder to find silence and solitude. So here's what I've tried to do. Here's a practice I have. My morning walk, get up early in the morning, put on the rollerblades, get the dog out. I used to always try to listen to a podcast or have some earbuds in or something. And over the last, 6-8 months, just have really stopped listening to anything. Not that, a lot of times I'll listen to stuff different parts of the day, listen to a podcast or a sermon or a book. But in the morning, that beginning time to be alone with God, pray through the Lord's Prayer, and then when I get back at the house, we have a little office off our kitchen, open up the Bible, and kind of read through the things that some of the mantras and the mission statement I say, and read the Lord's Prayer again, and then start with reading 2 to 3 chapters in the morning. And I have time to do that. I get up early enough to do that. Again, that's me. That might not be you. That might not be you. So what's your way of silence and solitude? Are you more of a night owl? Is silence and solitude something that happens at night? Do you have a lunch break where you can take a walk outside, where you get that silence and solitude, that time to just ask God your questions and then open up the Word and see what the answers are? That time to get away with the Lord, okay? All right, let's keep moving. We good? You guys staying awake? I put you to sleep yet? No. All right. Okay, Sabbath. Here's another practice. Old Testament says that they were commanded to have the Sabbath. They had to do this. It's the command of God. It's in the 10 Commandments to practice the Sabbath day. And they got really legalistic with it even in the New Testament. And Jesus has this great line where Jesus himself practiced the Sabbath. We're not obligated to practice Sabbath. But then he said to them, he said, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the Lord even of the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was made for man. God gave us this day off as a gift to, again, reconnect with God. Now, in the Old Testament, they would make that Saturday. In the New Testament, many people have made it Sunday. Why? That's the day Jesus rose from the dead. So every Sunday you can celebrate Easter. Every Sunday, set aside that time to celebrate the resurrection. Well, because our country was founded with people of Jewish background and Christian background, we get 2 days off, right? We have a Sabbath on Saturday and Sunday a lot of times, but sometimes we fill up both of those days with lots of stuff. And so something to consider. Now, I just went through this book again in our men's mentoring. Some people here have gone through this book as well. I was doing this a lot better before and trying to get back into the habit with this with our family, to turn off my phone Friday night and turn it back on Sunday morning, to just be alone with the family, go do something, go on a hike with them. What the kids really liked is when we had candles that we'd put on the table and turn off the lights and light candles, have dinner at night and have them light the candle, and maybe read a psalm and have a special meal and have some really sweet, sugary, awesome dessert afterwards. But it's a time, really, Sabbath can be a time of delighting in God, a time of worship and rest. Resting from your work, recognizing that God is always at work, so you don't have to be. Resting from any kind of guilt or shame, recognize that you're a forgiven, loved child of God. A time to, again, reconnect with nature, where you're excited to get back into to seeing God's good creation. So all those things, that's my practice. Think about it for yourself. Think about taking a full day off every week. Every week. Not only in the Old Testament, they took a full day off, but then once every 7 years, they were supposed to take off a full year. So once a week, and then take off a full year every 7 years. That's what they would do. And they would just eat off whatever came up out of the ground. And God said, I'll bless you enough. It's an act of trust, an act of faith. It was a time of reconnecting with God. But think again of how are you going to build your trellis? I'll tell you, when you give yourself permission to stop, and whatever that looks like for you, again, maybe that means you're a real active person. I'm going to go on a longer hike because I'm sitting behind a computer all week, and that's your Sabbath. For those who, I've heard it said this, for those who work with their mind, rest by using your body. And those who use their body, rest by using your mind. If you're working a really physical labor job all week, maybe your Sabbath day is, if you're working a real physical job, then your Sabbath day is just to sit and make a fire and just chill out for the day. I would hopefully find things that are renewing. Maybe read a book that you really like, or do something that is fulfilling and encouraging. I don't know if watching a bunch of garbage TV shows, if they're not going to be filling you up with delight and worship. If you can't be worshiping God doing it, I'm not saying you shouldn't watch TV, but make sure it's something you could be worshiping with, you're still honoring God with, and you're delighting in Him. But again, if you're somebody who works with your mind during the week, maybe you want to work with your body on that Sabbath by going on that hike, going on a bike ride, doing something that. And then if you're somebody who works with their body, maybe you want to take it off and just rest with your mind on that day off. So that's some advice. Again, tailor it to yourself, not legalism, but think about taking a day and resting and giving yourself permission to do that. Because what do we pride ourselves in the United States? How are you doing? I'm busy. I'm really busy, right? We wear busyness as a badge of honor. Jesus didn't. So think about that. Simplicity. Jesus talks about this. He says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? In another section, Jesus also says, a man's life, a person's life, does not consist in their abundance of possessions. This is not saying, simplicity is not saying you can't have any possessions, but maybe be more strategic about the possessions that you do have. Because every time you buy a new thing, what does that mean? Another thing to insure, another thing to clean, another thing to take care of and manage. And guess what all of that does? Gives you more anxiety, gives you something else to think about, something else to control. And so considering and being more strategic on what you buy. Because the more you have, it has like a gravitational pull, right? The larger something is, it kind of pulls your heart. And so Jesus says, don't store up treasures on this earth, because when you store them up, the more stuff you store up here on earth, there's some gravitational pull to those things, and you can't serve both God and money. You can't be fully devoted to both things. So think about that. I'd say out of all these things, doesn't mean you can't feast, right? Jesus feasted, and he had things. He had feast at the wedding in Cana, and yet he had no place to lay his head. So that kind of contrast, where he still used things and enjoyed things and enjoyed good food and friendship and stuff, doing things together, but also it didn't seem like he had a place to lay his head. So that contrast of enjoying life and yet simplicity. So we've moved, in our ministry, going to seminary and back, and all these times we're always moving, it feels like. And so all this, we've purged so many times our house as you move, and then just simplifying things, one TV down in the basement to keep it kind of hard to get to, just so it's not always in front of us. Just some of these simplistic things, simplifying our house. But I to be honest, this is the area I need to work on. Still, I feel like we have way too much stuff. Way too much stuff that we're thinking about, cleaning, washing, taking care of. Still way too much stuff on our mind that gives us more emotional anxiety of things we have to take care of. So, slowness. This whole idea of being in a rush, always in a hurry, that picture I gave you when we started this out. When you're rushing out the door to get to church, are you saying the most Christian things to your family members or friends as you're late for whatever, late for church or late for that dinner? No. What we see was so amazing. Jesus, one of my favorite stories of this is in Mark 5. It's in the other Gospels as well, where Jesus gets this message that Jairus, the synagogue ruler, his daughter is sick. So a VIP, a very important person, is asking Jesus to hurry, come, because his daughter is sick and dying. And so Jesus starts to go that direction. On the way, a woman who is unclean ceremonially because of bleeding for her whole life reaches out and touches his cloak. We don't know her name. She's probably a nobody according to many people, because if she's been ceremonial and clean, she couldn't have been around a lot of people, couldn't have went in the temple. But Jesus saw her. When this woman touched his cloak, he stopped because he recognized that she was calling out for healing. She was healed by just touching him. She stopped and talked to him and paid attention, or he paid attention to her. He wasn't in a rush, even though that meant that Jairus' daughter ended up dying. Now, the good thing about Jesus is he could raise the dead. So he raised the dead of this young girl, but Jesus just seemed to have time for everybody. He was not in a hurry. He had time. He practiced this practice of slowness. And so I think that is really important for us to think about. Again, don't think I'm doing a great job with this, but our phones have given us this, this idea that we can do everything at once and everything at lightning speed. And so I'm trying to discipline my phone. Like I try to put my phone in its place by taking all the social media stuff off it, taking email off it, taking off anything that could just be this thing where I think I gotta be doing 5 things at once, gotta be checking 5 things at once, gotta 5 things dinging at once, and just slowing down. So, I mean, it really catches me times where I'm looking at something and my kids are saying, Dad, I'm looking at this other thing that doesn't matter. When my kids, I mean, the best thing we can give our families and friends and people is our face. That's what we ask of God when we have the blessing at the end of the service, right? The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The best thing we can give people is our face, is our attention. That's what they want. And so how do we make sure that we're slowing down enough to pay attention to the people in our life? So what are some of the structures in your life where you can give people attention in those things? So practicing some of these things. Okay, I'm going to try to rip through this a little quicker here just so we can break out into groups. Socializing, oh man, COVID has just really hurt us as we're social beings. We're not created to be alone. We're not created to be alone. We're not. That's on the first page of the Bible. And we see that Jesus practiced a life of community, of helping people. So it says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. Jesus, he spent his ministry with 12 guys and really gave time to 3 of them. He was always with them. He did ministry on the road with these people, building community, lived with people, did life with other people, and really invested in a few people. And then after Matthew was brought in as one of the disciples, then it says, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, so Matthew throws this party and brings his tax collectors and sinner friends over, and they came and they ate with Jesus' disciples. And the Pharisees saw this and asked, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Why do you have this community of people you hang out with? And Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need the doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners. So Jesus had this group, he socialized, he got together. He never participated in the sin. He never became, somebody who was sinful in that kind of sense or giving in these things, but he loved people, he gave mercy to them, he saw the importance of community. And man, if you want to change some of your habits, probably the powerful thing to do is change your community. That's why CrossFit, that whole workout program is so successful, because you get a bunch of people together who are working out together and you do way more. I'd like to say that I had to go back to the gym. I'd like to say that I could do all this by myself. I have the discipline to do by myself, but man, I just do better when we're around different people. What does financial peace course on getting out of debt do the best job? Getting people around other people. What's so good about this? The chat room in here to see all you guys chatting with each other, and then the discussion afterwards. The discussion afterwards is probably way more important and helpful than even anything I do, because we need each other. So let me keep moving so we can get to that discussion time. But so here are some things that I try to do. Pastor Ben Zock at St. John's down the road on 68th and Forest Home. He's been a good friend for a long time. He's kind of my accountability partner. Do life with him, tell him, confess my sin to him, talk to him on a weekly basis. We have a Friday check-in at 1 o'clock. And then I have a monthly check-in with some of my classmates from seminary. We have a Zoom meeting, and then I also started working out with a group of guys. Somebody told me about this. You go to the beach on Saturday mornings, and we start doing this crazy workout thing. And again, all these things to just try to find ways to gather with people, because we need each other. We need to hear from each other. We need the accountability. We need to know that they're okay with us. We're okay with them. We just need each other. Okay, fasting. Probably out of all the practice, my least favorite practice. But this idea of, man, when we get so consumed by technology or food or entertainment or whatever, I preached on this at Ash Wednesday, this idea of fasting from things, where sometimes we're leaning too heavily. It's taken up too much in our life. And so Jesus says when you fast here. He doesn't say if you do, he says when you do. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So if you're going to do this, don't do it for show. Do it because you want to depend more on God. You want to depend more on God, and taking those times where you should be on your phone or you should be eating or whatever it is you're relying too heavily on to be in prayer, be in God's word. That's another, could be the Pharisees, the Old Testament, they would fast once a week. Oh man, that sounds hard to not eat once a week so you could be totally devoted to the Lord, but a practice. So again, I've done this before. I don't do it as regularly as I would want. But try to do it once a week with the phone and try to do it with food every once in a while, but need to work on all this more and more. I can get too, I don't know, what's the word, just indulgent or overindulge and things like that, and so many things can be can be part of my weakness too. All right, keep going, and then just taking care of your body. You know, again, I told you that story when Elijah was going through that moment where he was just depressed and he was just totally burnt out and wanted to give up. The first thing that God gave him was not a word of the Lord. The first thing he gave him was a good meal. And so sometimes you just need a snack. You know, sometimes you need some good food. Sometimes you need a rest. Sometimes you need a good night's sleep. Sometimes you need to just take care of your body and go on a walk. And so don't discredit your body. We are body and soul, emotional, physical creatures. And so if you haven't slept in a few days, you haven't had a good meal in a few days, you haven't moved your body in a few days, no wonder it's so hard. You're fighting against so many different things. It's not your fault. So sometimes you just need to find a way to start taking care of your body so that, have you ever felt more ornery when you didn't get a good night's sleep? Have you ever felt more ornery if you just haven't been able to move your body a little bit or had a bad meal or whatever it is? So we see this even with Jesus. He cares about people's bodies and their souls. When Jesus fed the 5,000, when he saw 5,000 people listening to him all day, he says, man, I'm worried about them. They're going to collapse on the way. We need to take care of their bodies. We need to give them some food. Jesus, I love this. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is when Jesus is napping in the boat when the storm was happening, right? And so it's okay to rest. We don't always need to be on the move. But also find ways to take care of your body. Good exercise, good food, good sleep. In the book, John Mark Comer, in Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, he says, before the invention of the light bulb, do you know what the average night of sleep was? 11 hours. What do we get now? You getting 8? Right? And we feel guilty because we're sleeping too much. We need it. So probably one of the most important things we can do for our emotional health is getting a good night's sleep. Okay, so I try to do exercise, afternoon workout, trying to get more sleep, those things. Okay, so here's some trellises, how you might build your trellis. Consider your purpose and personality. Don't do the things I'm doing because you just heard I'm doing them. Figure out your plan. Write it down. Consider areas of your life that are causing anxiety, weakness, disconnection from God. Where is your trellis breaking down? What are some unhealthy habits that you're building in your life that you're saying, if I would just build a little different structure, I would have more room to connect with God. I would have more room to love other people. I'd be slowing down enough to see people in front of me. And then I would encourage you, maybe try at least one practice for a few weeks. Pick one of these things and try them in your own way, or maybe a different practice in your own way, and then see if you can get someone not just to hold you accountable, but to do it with you.